it's hard to believe that it's just over 2 years since the late great Bap Kennedy passed away. Bap's wife Brenda will be joining us in the studio shortly to tell us about a new EP of previously unreleased material of Bap's called Love Hurts. But before that, we're going to dig into the archives and show you a great live performance of Bap in these very studios back in 2009.
When we were young, we had it all. We had each other till we heard our freedom call. And even though I let you go, darling, it hurt me more than you will ever know. So here I stand, entirely free. Only my freedom, it don't mean nothing to me. I'd rather be entirely yours. Years have gone by and still my love for you endures. So long ago, you went away. I was to wait for you when you'd be back someday. What can I do? What can I say? Your empty promises, they seem so far away. So here I stand, entirely free. Only my freedom, it don't mean a thing to me. I'd rather be entirely yours. Years have gone by and still my love for you endures. All our ideas got in the way. We got our freedom, but we had a price to pay. Life has moved on. Don't say I'm wrong. Don't ever blame me that I chose to move along. So here I stand, entirely free. Only my freedom, it don't mean a thing to me. I'd rather be entirely yours. Years have gone by and still my love for you endures. So here I stand, entirely free. Only my freedom, it don't mean a thing to me. I'd rather be entirely yours. Years have gone by and still my love for you endures.
So good to see that performance once again from our archives, Bap Kennedy and his wife Brenda. And Brenda Kennedy joins me now in the studio. Brenda, how are you?
I'm well, thank you, Robin.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
It's been a while.
It's been ages, hasn't it? Yeah, we were just trying to work out when it was.
2009, I think.
This is the same year as the Love Hurts, interestingly.
And that's what we're here to talk about today, the Love Hurts CD that you're releasing.
Yeah.
So tell us how this whole Love Hurts thing came about. How did you discover these tracks?
I went to Rod's studio, Rod McVeigh, you know, that we did a lot of work with, and it was him that bound it and let me hear it. And it just took me right back, because you forget things that you do.
Yeah.
And it did knock me back, to be honest, emotionally at the time, quite a bit. There's something about music, you know, it can get you. And I took a few weeks to sort of process it and wondered what I should do with it. And then it crossed my mind to put it out as a single. And then it sort of went from there, because if you go into all the trouble, as you know, like putting out a single, there's a lot of work actually. It made sense while I'm doing all that to put some other tracks with it. And then I thought that it would be good to use it to raise money for Marie Curie.
Yes.
And it all sort of came together and seemed to make sense, and it's all worked very well because it's had fantastic support, really great feedback. And the thing about it is, it's not an ordinary music CD.
Yeah.
You know, The Love Hurts is obviously a music, but most of a lot of the CD is really about Bap the man.
There's part of an interview on this CD as well, and of course Bap was very ill at the time when this interview was done.
He was, although you wouldn't really know from listening to it. At the time, it was Ralph McLean came out, and he came to the house because Bap wasn't well enough to go into the studio.
Yeah.
And but it was very important to Bap. He wanted to do the interview, and Ralph, he actually did the interview in 2 separate days and stages, you know, and it did take a lot out of him. But as I say, it was very important to him. And also, I remember around that time there were Marie Curie nurses coming in overnight, and I remember they were lovely people, and I remember talking to one of the ladies around that time and saying how it's amazing, you know, he's just done an interview.
Yes.
You know, and that's very intense, and it was over an hour or whatever it was at the time. And, you know, I can't, you know, what he's going through at the moment. She said to me, but people don't see the other 23 hours.
Yeah.
And I thought that really, really sums it up, because that bit, you know, he really pulled out all the stops for that interview. You wouldn't really hear, although he actually broke down at one stage during, I think it was possibly the first hour of the interview. And it was because I think that, you know, he'd done a lot of interviews in his life. And there's, you know, these days you can find out a lot of things about people just by going on the internet.
Yeah.
But this thing about his Asperger's syndrome and his difficulties that he'd had, they were nowhere. Nobody knew, because he kept it completely private. And he knew that this was the only time that he was going to be able to do that. And he sort of stopped Ralph and said, I need to get real here, you know. So that's the reason I selected that particular bit, because I knew it was so important to him. He wanted to get it out there, and he spoke so truthfully. I thought it was very engaging, you know, what he said about Asperger's syndrome was the engine of his creativity.
Yeah.
And he talked frankly about the difficulties and so forth. But that's the reason, you know, because he was always a very real kind of a guy, very authentic. And I just felt that it was important to get that out. So as I say, there is music on it, but it's very different. You know, it's not like an ordinary, you're not buying it for something you know, you just listen to as music. So, but the 2 music tracks, you know, pure music tracks, are at the beginning. So if you don't want to listen to the rest, it's up to you. But saying that, also the other tracks were put together by Ralph McLean, and you know, he's put music through them, you know, so they're not just like, so it's nicely done. You know?
And I know the CD's been well received across the world. I mean, even I saw Mark Knopfler's been endorsing it, hasn't he?
That's right, which was really lovely. You know, he, as you know, was a big supporter of Bap's, and you know, they worked together a lot over the years, and he produced The Sailor's Revenge, you know, one of Bap's, some people think it was a real masterpiece, that album. And, you know, so Mark Knopfler had an awful lot of respect for him, which was very gratifying, you know.
Steve Earle was a big supporter as well,
he was,
and I believe he wants to re-release something as well, doesn't he?
Yeah. He produced the very first solo album, Domestic Blues, and he would like to re-release that on vinyl, and hopefully that will happen next year. And he's written some really, really lovely, very, very, very lovely liner notes for the album. So, you know, and you can hear it's so sincere what he says about him. So that's also very special. So it's just fantastic. And Van Morrison was very good to him as well.
Of course, yeah.
I know he told me about, Bap told me about him just letting him come to the studio, to his Van Morrison's own studio, to record The Big Picture, which was so generous and kind of him, you know, and you know, so it's lovely.
So Brenda, I just wanted to ask you, how did you and Bap meet?
We met, there's a few versions of this, but the real version is we met when I was giving a talk about Asperger's syndrome in Glengall Street in Belfast, and he turned up as listening to the talk, and at the end of the talk, the girl that was giving the talk came and said to me, "Would you like to meet Bap Kennedy?" And I actually didn't know him, and she said, "I think he'll be able to help you." It was a sort of interesting, prophetic thing. Probably for both of us, we helped each other, and he, at the time, my son, who has Asperger's syndrome, was trying to get into playing the guitar, but it was very hard to get the right teacher or the right help for him. And she said that he's really good with kids with Asperger's syndrome. That's my introduction to him. At the time, he was going through a bit of a difficult time in his life. He had actually stepped away from music. And he was going through this whole thing on his own journey. I knew nothing of this at the time, but what he was doing really was to help. He was doing this, helping other kids, helping kids with Asperger's syndrome and autism. He was just encouraging them with music because he always greatly believed in the healing power of music, and he was really good at it. I mean, I was also working in the NAS, National Autistic Society, at the time, so we ended up kind of being a bit of a team working together on Asperger's syndrome. Originally, just we were working together on that. And then he was helping my son. It became a friendship. Then he discovered that I loved music, although he didn't actually, it was a bit taboo. He did not want to talk about his own music at the time because of his own thing. And he discovered that I had loved music when I was younger and had sort of given it up because of various reasons. He was like, "You're telling all these other people about that and you're not doing it yourself." And then he asked me I said I used to enjoy writing songs. And he said, "Well, for next week, I want you to," when he was sort of taking this role. And then I kind of thought, well, I can't. And then he liked my songs. He said, "I want to record those." We went into Rod's, which is where we kind of got together with Rod. And we did my album, you probably remember that way back in the day. We did all that. And at the end of the album, that was going to be it. And he was like, "Well, do you want to come and sing do some backing vocals for me? Do you want to, And we ended up, it just was obvious where it was heading, So it was a bit of a journey.
But it was a great journey, and you and him were so close.
We were close. Everybody said they never, not everybody, but an awful lot of people said they never saw one without the other.
Exactly.
And it was from the very start. It really was. Even at the very start, it was like, even though at the very start we weren't together, it was constantly emailing, constantly texting, communicating. And then once we got together, I remember there was a girl in Hollywood, we used to love going for coffees and stuff like that, where we're great. Neither of us drank because of, Bap's issues with drink, and I gave up drink too then, so we were both the same. But we did love going in for the coffees and all that. And I remember there's a girl in Hollywood after he died, and she came over and she said to me, "I have never actually seen one of you without the other before." And I thought that really sums it up, because they just saw us. We were always he used to say we're joined at the hip,
One of my greatest memories will always be Christmas Eve, 2009. I was doing the evening radio show into Christmas Day, and yourself and Bap came in, performed live in the studio, did Moonlight Kiss live, and then
I can't remember the
and then did a
details
lovely version of Silent Night. As we came up to midnight into Christmas. Really, really good memories.
I remember going in, I remember it was lovely, and I know that Bap was very fond of you as well, so it was lovely.
It was always good to have him on the TV or on the radio show. We all have our lovely memories. We're going to show some more in a second from the archives. Brenda, if people want to get their hands on Love Hurts, how do they do that?
BapKennedy.com. It's really simple. It's dead simple. Couldn't be easier. It's just on the homepage.
And every penny's going to Marie Curie,
every
of course,
penny,
as well.
Every penny. Bap's sister Marion has paid for half of the outlays. I paid for the other half, so everything's covered. So every penny will go to Marie Curie.
Brenda, it's been lovely seeing you.
Okay, great to see you.
As always, and we're going to delve into the archives once again. And here's another great performance from the late, great Bap Kennedy.
Leave behind your worries, really very small. Come with me, set sail with me on the mighty ocean. Alcohol. Sail around insanity. I've heard those demons call. Once or twice I have been capsized on the mighty ocean. Alcohol. I lost my darling brother. Watched him slowly fall. As he hit the spray, he was swept away on the mighty ocean. Alcohol on the mighty ocean. So leave behind your worries, really very small. Come with me, set sail with me on the mighty ocean. Alcohol on the mighty ocean.